now. This is the 8-9 combo. I'm Brett McKay and Harry Jones. We are into the international rugby season in the Southern Hemisphere. Hello, mate. How you doing?
How's it, Brett? And I am headed to my home hemisphere soon. Looking forward to these tests more than maybe I have in a long time. I've dubbed them different things. The rectification series, where Rossi and Andy square off, the revenge series, where Wales plays Australia, the recreation series, where the French are taking nobody to play Argentina, and then the rectal exam series, where New Zealand is about to give England a rude awakening.
Yes.
And I know that you're a girl dad, so I've compared these to Taylor Swift songs. Sorry, but the All Blacks song would be Mean. Borthwick's England would be You Need to Calm Down, because they're getting way ahead of themselves. Wales is Blank Space. Joe's Australia. I think it could have been in Never Ever Getting Back Together Again with Eddie, but now it's just Shake It Off. Shake it off, baby. And for Rassi, it's I Knew You Were Trouble When You Walked In. For Andy at Ireland, it's Bad Blood. That Irish South African series is heating up.
Well, I did not have Harry Jones outing himself as a Swiftie on my bingo card this week, but here we are. We're at episode 21 of the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast, and thanks so much for including us in your rugby week. So let's whip down the short side for another week, mate, with cheers and jeers. For the weekend, you are leading off.
My cheers will go to the Irish coaches, Andy Flippin Farrell, Paul Bloody O'Connell, Simon Easterby, Mike the Feral Cat, and John the musical scrum coach, because they selected a proper team. They did not do what the French have done, which is take exactly 0 players from their their first selection from 2023. Ireland has only 4 missing. That's Gibson Park injured, Sexton retired, Hansen injured, and Keenan playing for the Olympics 7. So that's a really proper team.
Strong
to take
squad.
down. No excuses made. No caveats. It's just going to be straight up 1 versus 2. Good on you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. My jeers for you, mate, is for rugby-free weekends.
It's horrible.
It wasn't completely rugby-free weekend. You watched the top 14 final, and we'll touch on that a little later. But down this part of the world, there wasn't a whole lot doing. I actually watched a Formula One sprint race in Austria live on Saturday night. That was
well, you do like the Formula One. You're a Formula One.
No,
fan,
I do.
Right?
I've got right into it in recent weeks. So that was fine. It was all good.
The under 20s, the juniors are playing, which is actually quite fun.
Yeah. I've not had a chance to tune in, but the Australian guys have started pretty well. So we will certainly touch on that over the next week or so. But a very special guest joins us this week, mate. We can't wait to get into what will be a fascinating chat about the broader state of play within Australian rugby. It's right after this. So right after this, right now, in fact, when we add him. The midfield options for our fictional 89ers team are about to grow deeper as we add a 67 Test Wallaby from that golden team that won the 99 World Cup, the 2001 British and Irish Lions Series, the Rugby Championship, 5 straight Bledisloe Cups. He played more than 120 games for Queensland and captained his state, and has since juggled a successful corporate and rugby administration career, holding numerous roles with the QRU before joining the board of Rugby Australia in 2020. He rose to the chair role of RA at the end of a rough 2023, meaning this 8-9 combo debut has been well earned by Daniel Herbert. Hello, Daniel. Welcome along. How are you?
G'day, Brett. G'day, Harry. Yeah, I'm doing okay.
You're doing okay. I've got into an intro groove, Harry.
You are.
I'm hitting the sweet spot here.
You really are. This is getting quite stupendous. So, Daniel, I remember you as an imposing figure in the midfield, a physical, smash mouth kind of player, ran great lines, but also took people out hard in the tackle. So I imagine, trying to transfer that into administrative role in business world. Are you the same kind of guy in the boardroom? Are you direct and clear and minded and take no prisoners, or have you developed a softer set of skills?
I think one of the comments I made to someone about one of the major differences going from the dressing room into a more of a corporate sort of setting, probably the biggest difference is around how blunt you can be with people. I think I remember some of the conversations you have in dressing rooms and you have in gyms and where you feel someone might not be pulling their weight and doing their utmost to make sure that the team exceeds. You can't really do that as harsh in a corporate space, or you'll have HR knocking on your door very quickly. So I've learned to temper myself, but there's a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of things that you learn from. I mean, one of the things I like about sport generally, but also footy, rugby, is you learn a lot of things there going through that you don't realise, but do transition into things outside.
Yeah.
So you learn a lot of really good skills, which has helped me in some way.
We had Phil Waugh on last year, Daniel, not long after he took on the CEO role, and he quickly said to us that the biggest lesson he's learned is that the difference between playing and administration is that when you're playing, at least you can see the hits coming.
Yeah, true. It's,
which sounds about valid.
Yeah, and look, it's been something that rugby has been or had as part of it for a long, long time. And I think if I, even going back to my time at Queensland Rugby, but I've been in and around the game since I was 5 years of age. And there's always been that level of almost, we wear it as a badge of honour that you like the confrontation, and part of what Phil and I on the board and the administration are trying to do is trying to break that down into, actually it's not helpful in a lot of regard. You actually have to leave that at the door. If Australia's to be as competitive on the world stage as it needs to be successful, then we've got to leave some of those those differences at the door, and then still be competitors on the field, but you've got to look to work a lot more collaboratively off the field, and leave it for the field.
Was administration something you thought you'd always get into rather than, say, coaching? Because you had QRU jobs only 5 or 6 years after you finished up playing, I think.
Yeah, I was over in France. I had a career-ending neck injury when I was down in Perpignan, and I remember the easy transition. Well, not an easy transition, but kind of the thing you look to when your career ends pretty suddenly, and then there's a few coaching offers that come in, and I thought about it, but then we were away at that stage, and I always thought I wanted to go home. We'd been away for about 4.5 years, and then you look at the lack of job security around coaching. You look at how many or how few jobs there are. And you just realise it's going to be, I'm okay if it's just me as a player, you ride those decisions, be it selection or injuries, you ride those disappointments. But, when you've got kids, I just started to think, well, it's, what do you want to do, or where do you want to be? And I chose where I want to be was Brisbane. I want to be back home near family. We wanted to start a family. And then I thought the last thing I want to bring home is all this, baggage that goes as being a professional coach. I think, I just think it was, and I'd promised my wife that after we were done, I wouldn't actually get into the administration side either. I'd said I was starting. So the first foray, when I first got back, I'd been away for 4.5 years. So you've got to reestablish contacts again, your network. Yeah. And a lot of my network was still in and around footy. So the first job that I actually took when I came home was redeveloping Ballymore Stadium and getting the approvals through government to do that, and trying to get the money to do that from government as well. So it was, it was pseudo rugby, but really about trying to go into property in a different way, but sort of using that to get my foot back in the door. And then it just sort of went from there, and I ended up breaking a promise and been breaking it ever since.
I was going to say, you're getting further and further into administration. You're not getting away from it now.
Yeah, but at least it's not my job. It's true. It's not what I do day to day to pay the mortgage and pay the bills. No. It's something else.
If it wasn't made in the wedding, then it's not a vow, so it's kind of not as serious. But when I knew that you were coming on, I got kind of canvassed to really dyed in the wool Australian rugby fans and kind of try to amalgamate all the different comments. The main thing is this: it seems like, and this is not a critique of you. This is from administration's past too. Is there doesn't seem to be a clearly articulated. This is where we are taking the ship. We're going in 5-10 years. It's been more a series of lurching from, overcoming some problems, some scandals, winning the news cycle. And it's kind of like, what are we doing? Are we defending turf? Are we doing an insurgency? Are we trying to take away territory? Are we defending home turf? I've heard people say, is it the ink blot strategy where you try to get bigger and bigger in Sydney and Brisbane and not try to be everywhere? Or is it more important to be everywhere incrementally? Can you kind of talk us through, I know these discussions are surely happening. Yeah. Can you talk us through kind of what is the synthesis of the board? I know you're not the only person on the board, but what do you think Rugby Australia is trying to do, and how?
I'd probably go back to when I first joined. There was a strategy then that got tipped on its head around COVID, and we simply didn't have the funds to be able to execute the strategy then. And then it was really survival mode that we went into for a couple of years, where we still had a very similar cost base, but none of the revenue to come in. So it became about survival. Then the only reason that I put my hand up to join in the first place was I saw at Queensland Rugby from my time working there, and what we just spoke about, the fragmentation of the game, where one level of the game doesn't trust the level up and so forth, and that the realization that unless we stop doing that, then we're not going to be successful on the big stage. And if you're not successful on the big stage, then that permeates through the whole game and impacts you in all sorts of areas. So when I put my hand up, I would say that for the next couple of years, it went into survival mode. Then as we started to come out, it became more around, well, how are we going to perform and do something that's going to shift the dial? And that's where I'd go back probably in year 2 of joining the board. It was then getting all of the states together and saying, well, look, the economic drivers of the game to enable us to get the money to grow are the Wallabies. And people don't like always hearing that, but men's 15s is 85% of the revenue. Then within that, roughly 80-20 rule, you've got the Wallabies who are key to that. At the moment,
it's the same in every country, right? I mean, across all the countries.
Yeah, and we've got they're a shop front, and our shop front's not performing. And if you look over the history of, going from Rod McQueen to now, generally, I mean, there's uplifts here and there, but are not more anomalies than patterns. And generally, we've been getting worse. We've been going from, I'd say, first, second of the world down to, I think, 9th. So
currently,
and so what my aim was to really, and that I was a backbencher at the time. My aim was really to try and convince the state bodies that they have to work hand in glove with the national body, or you will reap what you sow. And what you will sow is the professional game will look very, very different to what it is now. And the only way collectively that we will get more money in the game, we'll get more opportunity to expand the game into other areas, is if our shop front performs. And that doesn't mean winning everything, but it means they've got to win as much as they lose. They've got to beat, they've got to go in every game against New Zealand. And that's another thing for us here, is we're always benchmarked against New Zealand. I remember looking at this a long time ago, where I think England had played New Zealand something like 3 times in 15 years or something ridiculous, whereas we played them 3 times a year plus in Super Rugby. So it's a pretty high benchmark, but the expectation is you've got to perform. No one wants to pay good money to see a bad movie. So you've got to be able to perform against New Zealand, or you've got to break away and do your own thing. They're the only 2 strategies I could see. So for me, it became about, you don't want to break away because you want to be on that world stage performing in World Cup. So you don't want to break away. Therefore, you've got to be more competitive. Therefore, you have to get the state bodies, the inputs into the national team, working hand in glove with the national team. And sometimes there'll be conflict, but you've got to overcome that. And, it's not about centralised control so much as it is having really good people who are good at their job and can get people behind them and make sure that there is a level of trust there. And so that's where the appointments became really important. So I think I think it lost that whole strategy started to sort of unravel a little bit when the decision was made to bring Eddie in, and some of those, some of the short-term decision makings that I said at the time, they're sugar hits. They're not going to have a deep lasting impact. They're sugar hits. And the concept of turning the form guide on its head for a World Cup didn't sit well with me, because I thought that undermines the work that we actually have to do. We were never going to win that World Cup. We were so far off the top 4 in my mind that it would have taken a red card or more for Australia to go through. Because of the draw, we could have made a semi, but we would have required more than that. So, that's where I think we've been lurching in Australia, from this short-term sugar hit, because you've got a federated model where you've got a lot of people with a say, and you've also got the competition with league and other sports where the expectation from the fans is we want quick success, and they don't want to hear, because it's not a great thing to tell people. You're just going to have to sit and wait and be patient. Because their view is, we've been patient for a long, long time, but it's going to take a little while. But first things first, we need to get some some really good people in the room, and that's where you need to get people who, without the centralised complete control that structures like Ireland have, then you've got to get people who are really good at what they do, but also can engender trust with the others. So what we started to do then, and what we've done, and probably getting back to the question, we've been building a strategy. We had a summit with all of the member unions, the Super Rugby clubs, and the other member unions, the community organisations. And we've been working for the last 3 months. We got them all in a room, a bit like what New Zealand Rugby did when they got knocked out in 2007. They got them all together in the island. We got everyone together in Melbourne. We sat down in a big room and laid it out. We can go in many different ways, but if you want to be, I think the thing that unites us and guides us is we want our national teams to perform. It engenders a feeling of, a good feeling that our national team does well on the world stage, be it the men's, women's team, the 7s, 15s. We want them to perform well. And that's something that can have an impact across the whole land, not just in one geography. So we'll work with you on that, but that's a non-negotiable that we get there. What can be negotiated is how we get there. And so for the last 3 months, Phil and his team have been working, weekly meetings with the member bodies. And then this Friday, so in a couple of days' time, we'll meet as a group together in Sydney, and we'll present the outcomes of all of that. And that will then allow us to go forward with a new strategy for the next 5 to 10 years.
What I was talking about when I look at Australia from the outside is talent that slips away. I'm a 12-year-old kid. I'm pretty good at something. I'm maybe going to be a big guy. And then 13, 14, it seems to be a lot of loss right between 14 and 18. You even see some of these players like Manny Miafu going, from Melbourne, and now he's, playing for Toulouse. He's playing for the French. Mac Hansen setting the world afire for Ireland. Jack Dempsey was one of the best carriers. I mean, I'm going on and on. Angus Scott Young. Really, it's amazing how many Australians are playing abroad, making very good money. And then I wonder, maybe it's not so much that the talent wasn't identified. It just wasn't any place to go. There was no place to put them. Minutes, just sheer minutes. So was part of that summit discussion talking about how we can get more minutes in more kids? Because guys just want to play. If I'm 15 and I get to play, I'll stay playing. But if it's difficult to get a game or minutes, maybe I'm just going to move on.
Yeah, part of the problem around our structure and our competitions, we don't play anywhere near as many as they do in Europe. Now, one of the, obviously just the way that occurs between the test season and the super season limits. If you don't make that Wallabies, if you make the Wallabies team and set up, then you're playing a lot of footy. If you're not, then there's a big drop off. So what the clubs are all looking at is then the Super Rugby clubs, what can we do then? Is it tours to Japan, tours to, I know the Reds are heading over to Europe. And others are all working on building more games. So there is that requirement. There's also a bit of an appetite here. I know of a number of different people who are putting together the thoughts around a national club competition to try and elevate that club competition. We've tried in the past with ARC and NRC, but that didn't get the following to allow that to continue. But we do have good tribalism with the clubs and the community game. I mean, we're mainly talking here about the professional game. The community game has been going very, very well. It's been growing for a long, long time. It's well run. So that side of the game, and I wouldn't say universally. I mean, there are parts to it that aren't working as well as they could. But by and large, the community game has been growing, and it's been run well. And there is an opportunity to do more with that, I think. But it's, do you encroach on the super season by growing that club competition? Do you try and expand out the Super Rugby season to have 3 rounds rather than 2? So there are ways to do it, but that's where then we've got to try and understand who's going to pay for it and what's the North Star. So I think it's the competition we have here. The teams only get 7 or so home games unless they make finals. That's not a lot to try and build out your season, but then you're probably playing, 15 tests on top of the 15 super games. So it depends on which way we decide to go. But there is a limited season between the club competition, the Super Rugby club, and the test. Everyone wants everyone wants those top players to be playing in their part of the competition. So the clubs want the super guys coming back to club. You know, if we play more tests, well, we want our guys available for test matches. So it's a trade-off trying to work out as we go into this, this new agreement, what we do.
And equally, Daniel, the Super Rugby teams would be saying, well, we're already training all week. Why can't we just be in a position where we're playing a localized Australian competition? And obviously, with the closure of the Rebels now, that becomes a little bit more problematic in that you do lose another team there. But are you open-minded as to what that sort of next tier, which is essentially what we're talking about, looks like? Could it still be a state-based type competition, which is your super squads less the Wallabies plus the best of the club players around the country?
Oh, we're open-minded to it, yeah, absolutely. But I think if you look at the clubs in the moment, what they want to do and what they're doing, some of them anyway, they're taking the opportunity. One of the great things about rugby has always been touring. So they're seeing the opportunity to tour, and they can get maybe 6 games on a tour, and you build that sort of team camaraderie when you're doing things like that. So back when I was playing, we had the Rico. I don't know if you remember, Brett, the Rico Championship. That after you'd finished Super Season, if you weren't playing for the Wallabies, you go and play in the Rico Championship, which was just an All Australian. Now at the time it was okay. It didn't get the same level of support as Super did. So it gives people more games, but you've got to make sure they're meaningful games too. So, I mean, I don't know whether more, there's a tipping point where more is better.
Sure.
But, the NFL don't play a huge amount, and they've got the most commercial, league in the world. So there's ways we can do it, but is it better to put more investment and more time into that tribal club competition, or is it better off trying to get our super teams playing more rugby and making sure they're more ready to go into the test arena?
Yeah. We've touched on the Rebels and the situation in Victoria, and there's obviously still a little bit to go around that. What sort of support mechanisms have you got in place for Rebels players and coaches at this point now, as they try and work out what is the next chapter and where might it be?
Well, the players, first of all, the players through their agreements, we as RA are on the hook for those. So any of the players that have contracts, then we have to stand them up, which is different to a lot of other geographies and sport. But the process there, a little while out, a couple of weeks out, we had to start scenario planning around, well, what if the Rebels don't get up, if this consortium doesn't present something that's viable, we have to start looking at where these players can go and what that process is. So from the player point of view, we would, through Peter Horn, he would engage through each state and say, what are the gaps? So we obviously oversee all the contracting. We've got all the contracts are registered. So we could see how many gaps there were at each team. They would then engage with the general manager through Peter and say, well, look, if the Rebels don't go ahead, are there players there that you'd be interested in? I can see that you've got these gaps on your list. Which ones would you be interested in? We're going to go and meet the players. And then Peter and Justin Harrison from Rupa went and sat down with the players and went through and said, look, if the Rebels don't go ahead, here are the teams that have gaps in the list in your position. Are you interested in going to either of these? And then that conversation would just go from there. Then, agents get involved and so forth. So they've been through that. And obviously when the Rebels were told that they wouldn't continue next year, then those conversations started to ramp up. And in reality, just through, and again, RA had very little to do with this circumstance. It just happened to be that the Waratahs had more gaps on their list than what the others. Most of them had already signed up quite a few of the players. The Waratahs didn't have someone who was doing that, so they let a few players go, and they had more gaps. So should these players want to stay in Australia, the most sort of openings are at the Waratahs currently. So then it becomes a contest. Some of the guys want to know who's going to coach, which will hopefully be sorted out in the not too distant future. And then obviously securing Simon there was a big first step as well. So so we'll start to see that I think finalised over the next few weeks in terms of the coach, the players. That should all be sorted out reasonably reasonably quickly, I would hope. In terms of the coaches, Jeff Parling's obviously gone on to the Wallabies.
Yep.
Not just the coaches, but the staff. So we went through. We sent our HR director down to Melbourne. So she was based there. She'd go through with each person around, whether there was a chance to relocate, to position them in the system somewhere else. If some of the other franchises had any gaps, if there weren't any gaps, then how can we help you try and secure employment somewhere else, and can we give you letters of reference and so forth? So. It's not a great situation to have to go through. Joining the board, you don't look at something like that, but I think RA's doing, they're doing what they can.
So is there a concern that you lose some really good coaching talent there?
Oh yeah, but I don't ever see it as losing. I mean, I think if people go, they'll improve because they're going to be more rounded coaches if they go and coach somewhere else. So
just stay in the game. Yeah, sure.
So through Peter, I mean, New Zealand have been doing this for years. They keep a network of their coaches from all over the world, and they stay in contact with them and the opportunity. Yeah. So we've been keeping in contact with various coaches who are coaching overseas. And when someone like Dan McKellar packed up and went to Leicester, I thought great. Go and get some experience over there. That'd be a good thing for his resume. That'd be a good experience to coach in that environment. So I don't see it as losing. I see it as Stephen Larkham going to coach in Munster. It's part of his professional development to go and coach in other areas. So no, I'm not concerned about the coaches per se. There's only a very limited number of jobs available at that level. Then the players, look, you want to try and keep. There's going to be 35, 40 less jobs in professional rugby. So you're going to lose some, and you're going to lose some that you don't want to lose. Back to, I guess, Harry's point earlier around the number of players that drop off. There's a natural drop off around that age in all sports, but where rugby is up against it is league spending a lot at that in that area. So I remember when I was at Queensland, the Broncos up here were spending $10 to every dollar we could afford. So that for me is a priority. That's a priority for and that's one club. So that for me is a priority as to how we try and secure the top 150 schoolboys, or at least as many of those as we can get, knowing that AFL and cricket and everyone else wants them. But, I was only going through a thing the other day about the top 50 league players from a few years ago, and where are they now? The top schoolboys don't always turn into the top players. What we've been more focused on, and through Peter and Joe and getting people like Simon and others that you'll see come on in a very short period of time, is I've never been too worried about the number of athletes and whether we have 4 teams, 5. I've never been overly concerned about that. But what I've been concerned for a long time, since David Nucifora left the building in around 2012, we haven't had a good system that's been maximising players. So, we've got this fragmented Super Rugby to national setup system where there's no oversight, no real oversight, no sharing of information or data or injuries or rehabilitation. All of that would kind of be everyone keeps everything close to their chest and doesn't share information. We have to break that down. So I've been more concerned about the system and getting the system right and getting the right people in the system that engender trust and have the right experience and skill to do that, less than there is the players, because I just think the system will take, and I think we've seen probably the best example of it is the Brumbies. The Brumbies for years have taken players who couldn't make it in Queensland and New South Wales and turn them into great players. So the system can do a better job across the board nationally in doing that. So once we develop that, and David tried to do that in Australian rugby, he was shown the door because of the infights and the politics around that. And then Ireland heard about it and got him on board and basically took them from 9th to 1st, 2nd.
2,
so he's shown that can work. So I'm hell bent on trying to create our version of that. And if we can do that, then we've got a pretty good chance of being in that top rung again.
So I've looked across the Irish model and how it differs and how it is similar to Australia quite a lot. And one thing that notices, so they have GAA, so the big hurling, 6'2" guy who's got some quicks and jumps and ball skills. That is a competition. But when they identify someone as a rugby player from their private schools, they're very good at taking a kid from Galway and saying, no, you're going to play in Dublin area. and they moved them, like Robbie Henshaw, Galway guy. And so he shows up as a Leinster guy in his whole career, but he really is from, Connemara. And so the difference there is the center of gravity in Ireland, but politically, socially, and rugby is in Dublin. And then with, obviously Cork as well. But in Australia, you always have this, pitched battle between, no, we don't want to make it to Sydney. And there's always that suspicion. But isn't that the only way you can really do academy and catchment systems and really catch the kids when they that big growth spurt from 18 to 22, when some of them turn into monsters, and that's the part where Nucifora really had more control in Ireland than it seems like the Australian version of Nucifora will have.
Yeah. So in Ireland, it actually wasn't the professional clubs that had the control. It was the amateur clubs. So the 32 amateur clubs all got together and wrote a white paper that they gave David and said, we want to give control of this system that we'll all vote for, and we'll force our professional clubs down this road. And David was given the white paper and the levers to be able to pull. So
that'll be like if East and Brothers and all these guys got okay.
Yeah.
So that's now we're hoping that and look, the change that you're talking about there, we think we can get to a position on that. It does take a change of our collective bargaining agreement with the Players Association to be able to do that. But we see, you would have seen earlier this year, or Brett, you would have seen definitely we moved only for a week or two, and it wasn't perfect, but Pony from Melbourne up to Sydney when we had that. Had a lot of the injuries. Now that was something that previously, just didn't happen. You'd have to get a contractual release, and then they were gone for good. So that's something that is going to be front and center, at least in our desire and wish list, is to be able to move players to where the opportunities are. You need your best players playing. If they're going to be sitting, three deep on the bench and not getting an opportunity in someone's warehousing, I certainly don't want to put up with that. We've got to be able to get those players playing, and up until now, it's really been through coercion and trying to appeal to the clubs to do the right thing. We need to get to a point where they understand that having the best players playing is not only going to give us a better chance to beat the New Zealand teams, which is how the competition and the fans are some way assessing the competition, but it's better for our Wallabies and our teams in gold that these players, the better players, are playing more often. So that's certainly. Harry, it's certainly a desire. It's not there yet, but that's certainly a desire to get to that point.
On that front, was centralisation almost became a dirty word toward the end of 2023, and it was. I sort of feel like I think the intended idea of it was probably right, and I think the intended idea then is still what you're aiming for. But for a brief period there, centralisation became complete takeovers, and so in the typical way of Australian state rugby, they all went, "Whoa, hang on a minute, we're not too keen on this."
I think it became known as a Hamishization.
I think it did. Yeah. Are you confident? And is the ball rolling enough now that you can get to that point where players and coaches and maybe even S&C staff and things can be contracted the right way to Rugby Australia?
Good question.
Yeah, I think so. We're definitely making progress, and through this next summit that we'll have this weekend or on Friday, that'll be the next big step. You'll start to see some announcements of staff as well that'll be coming through that are in the pipeline at the moment. So we're building the capability, and we're trying to make sure we get people in the system that are trusted by people. They're good at what they do and they're trusted. So it's one of those things that's always popped up, and I've been reading all the reports from there would probably be 8 different reports that have come out over a period of time as to what needs to happen. We've all of the clubs and ourselves have read it for years, and there's always been that just that political chasm to get over. And if I look around the States at the moment, I think it's a rare time that I've been involved where you haven't got any sort of wild card there that I can see at the moment where they're totally against this, and over my dead body will I give any sort of control. There doesn't seem to be any of that at the moment. There seems to be everyone's in survival mode because of the finances aren't great, and it's a struggle. But I think by and large there's really good sort of discussions and communications and respectful discussions around what we need to do, and people are accepting. I remember when I first joined the board, I set up a high performance advisory group. I got a bunch of really experienced people who've done this for a long time, and seen other sports, and everyone was on board with, we need to do it. And I'm going back 3 years now, and then it came down to the decision making tree of, when you choose a new coach, here's who gets the D. And no, we don't agree with that. We'll consult with you, but we'll get the decision. And no. The D's here, you'll be consulted. So we've been sort of chipping away at that, but no, just understanding, getting the clubs to understand. We're not out here we're not trying to take you over. We're not trying to, take all of the decision rights off you. What we do is we want to work collaboratively together. And I remember, a certain very prominent player, very expensive player, at one of the clubs turned up to Wallaby camp a couple of years ago, and he was broken. And his club were playing him every week, 80 minutes, and he was broken by the time he got to Wallaby camp. They had to let him go. And, he's one of our higher paid players and most important players, because certain people hadn't been sharing data and wouldn't let them know where this person was up to. And, all of that stuff. We had Wallaby coaches turning up to club training, getting kicked out and you're not welcome to attend training. They're on my watch. You get them in 6 months' time. So all of that, I think, pleasingly, I would say, I think that's now, that's sort of been dealt with. It's sort of in the rear vision mirror. And I do get the feeling with the super clubs that there is a feeling that we have to do this or a version of it. And, if we can, it might not look exactly the same as New Zealand. It might not look exactly the same as Ireland. It'll be our version of it, but, it'll make sure that we have a lot more central influence over some of the key decisions, so that we make sure that we continue to get the right people.
And that's what will let you move a third in line scrum half from Sydney to Perth or whatever it might be. So that will work on that. There's lots that we can get into it, and conscious that we probably should talk about Test rugby here at some point today too before we let you go. But I just wanted to ask you, what does it look like Super Rugby will look like next year? And I suppose the follow on from that, the commission probably coming into effect this year. The CEO starts later this month. Is that commission going to be funded in a way that it can be run effectively and the competition can actually be marketed the way everyone thinks it probably should be?
So Super Rugby, it's still being finalised between Australia and New Zealand. What it looks like happening is an 11-team competition. I'm still hoping to try and squeeze an Anzac Bledisloe in there as well. So it looks like an 11-team comp with a 6-team final series, and that'll be for next year. And then, simultaneously working on then what the next year looks like.
Plans for 2026. Which is when the next TV deal will kick in, isn't it? Yeah.
So that's obviously a key priority. And then in terms of the Super Rugby Commission, he hasn't started yet, but Jack Mesley will come on as CEO. And the commission is co-funded between New Zealand Rugby and Australian Rugby. And it's really, I guess, our view of it is it's a sort of a logistical marketing innovation hub that, can provide the clubs felt that through having teams in black or teams in gold, the national bodies, focus wasn't always on promotion of the Super Rugby, which I can understand, having sat in one of those chairs. And look, that's what they're asked to do. Now, will they be funded? Look, no one will ever be funded to where they would like to be, but there'll be enough there to, and I don't think it's all about marketing. And I think some of it's got to be around innovation and the product and some of the rules and I think their job is to get the clubs to work a bit more collaboratively together, where I think this year one of the good things was around team releases on the same day. I thought that was a good thing.
Yes.
One thing, where we got to be careful also, we got SANZAR, they between SANZAR and then the Super Rugby Commission, should they be one body, collectively one body where they can work more deeply across the whole 12 months as opposed to having two different bodies sort of working on two different products for 6 months a year. So
I suppose the obvious answer there is, why would South Africa and Argentina really be overly fussed about how Super Rugby works.
Mm.
Yeah.
So Daniel, I do know one funding that is actually as much as we wanted to do. It's my travel budget, which Brett is always wondering about, and he wants to audit it. I think we'll have to use the same auditor that you guys have. But I looked at the motto of your school at Marist College, Ashgrove, which is Viriliter Age, which sounds like, with age comes virility. We'll say it's that. It actually is to act courageously. Is there anything that you can point to where you are about to do something courageous, or you think you've already done it, where, looking 5 years from now, you'll look back and say, I acted courageously as my school urged me to do?
Yeah. Oh, Harry, I think we've been talking about it. I mean, everyone who's tried to bring a more centralised approach has always been burnt at the stake in Australian rugby. So,
Yes.
and I knew.
Yes.
I knew by sort of putting
By
my
5 separate torches, to be fair, Daniel.
Do you think maybe the debacle in 2023 in the French World Cup is helped? People just go,
It feels unifying.
Yeah.
Look, possibly. I mean, it's been coming. If you look at the trends around performance, and then you correlate the trends in performance with crowds and so forth, I mean, it's been coming for a while. And at the same time, I remember in the Arbib report in 2012, he said the sleeping sport really is rugby league if they get their act together. And I think they've finally done that. They're in a reasonable position. So we got some strong competition there. But it's, and you mentioned Ireland before with Gaelic hurling, soccer. I mean, there are a lot of similarities there. Yeah. But I can't see. I guess I'm of the view that we are going to have to get more out of less, which means we have to be super collaborative. There's plenty of examples in sport where not the best funded team has been the most successful. So in terms of acting courageously, I knew when I said, I put my neck out and said we have to do this, or I'm not going to stand around, because you're then just attached to a sport that's in a death spiral. And unless you're prepared, unless the stakeholders are collectively prepared to put their necks out and take a leap of faith, then what are we here for? And I'm talking about the professional game there more so. The amateur game, I mean, there's always been there's two streams, and whilst it's one game, there's two streams, the professional game and the community game. Now, rugby league has always been professional. Rugby only went professional 25, 30 years ago. We're still coming to grips with that. Something I'm really happy about is, and the thing that we struggle with, we beat our chests about being a global sport, but we've never, outside of World Cups, we've never really been able to commercialise that. And now something like the Nations Championship, for me, is an example of, the domestic product of an NRL, AFL, that allows them to be a lot more commercial. We've never been able to use our global sort of position to
on a biannual basis. Yeah.
And this is an example outside of a World Cup where actually we can use our size and our global nature to generate more income for the sport. And so I'm excited about the sport seems to be getting to that point where we can use it for impact. But so I think there's some really good things coming down the road. Courageously, I think it's I could be burnt at the stake as well, but if I'd be happier being burnt at the stake and trying, rather than sitting there and knowing that I don't see another option really. I see the only option as we go within and we keep within Australia and we work on our in our game in a bubble, and we work really closely with all the teams there, and almost shun New Zealand, because if we don't get to that point professionally, then we're not going to be competitive, and we won't be competitive when we go to a World Cup. So you really are cutting off that side of your game in terms of doing that. But so I don't know if that answers.
When they were picking the next chair, did everyone just point at you? Is that how it went?
They all took a step back and left me there.
The one day where you really needed a less than ideal internet connection, you were too strong and bold.
No, look, it's a big honour, and I was very, I'm very vocal and strong on certain things. Whenever we're having the meetings, and I guess that now gives me the opportunity. Whilst I had a little bit of influence, that you have more as the chair, and I'm very committed to this path that we're on, and it's a big honour. But I'm also a realist that you got to get people going with you. It's hard when you don't have the money. Even like this year we're in now, the end of this year, it's going to be a really tough financial year for us. The difference between an English series, 3 tests against England and 2 against Wales and Georgia, it's about $20 million difference.
Yeah,
and for a union that you can lose. Generally, people lose money in a World Cup year, but we're going to lose a lot more than that. And so we need to get to a point, and that's where we're lucky. We've got these two big capital events on the horizon, and that gives us a chance to just reset the game, to be front and center. I don't think Australia's prepared for the Lions next year in terms of the Australian public and what impact that is going to have. They just take over cities, and they're coming off COVID where they didn't get to tour last year. And talking to government officials around, do you understand? They drank the 4X Brewery Dry last time. This is going to be huge. And
it kind of feels like it's been almost lost in the ether that all the tickets are gone, all the travel packages are fully exhausted. There's wait lists for wait lists right now in all through the UK for people to come out. It feels like it's the least known massive event sporting wise that's about to happen on our shores.
Yeah, and it's going to be huge, because I think also they didn't get to tour South Africa last year.
They've got 8 years of savings.
8 years of savings, and they're going to blow it down here, which is great news for Australia. But my focus is, and our focus is, just on making sure that the Joe has a team that can be competitive, because we want to win that series, and we've got to go deep in a home World Cup. And so with that, with the Lions, with the home men's World Cup, home women's World Cup, and then we've got the Olympic sevens, we've just got this platform that we won't see again in any in a very long period of time. So we've got a chance there to reset the game, to get some money in the bank, to set ourselves up for a fund for the community game, that the community game can be safe, but the professional game's got to fund itself, and we've got a chance there to put it on a good footing, I think. But
it's enviable. Every other country would want to have that set of things. On the World Cup, have you seen how the French, the difference between what they forecast and what they've actually taken in is a massive deficit. Bernard Laporte had an actual sort of separate standing corporation that, standalone. I knew where it was in Paris, actually, and they were doing planning, and they were kind of, I don't know, autonomous maybe. What's the lesson takeaway? Is RA going to have more arms around that in terms of vendor management and event planning, or is it going to be a separate entity?
Yeah, no, it's a different model this time. So World Rugby have changed the model, so we get a guaranteed amount, which is
good,
which is very favourable. But there's a local organising committee, which we will have some representation on and some influence on, but there's a local organising committee that are working on all of those operational aspects. But from our side, it's we did all the projections. Halfway through the process, World Rugby said, actually, we'd like to change the model. They can see obviously
joint venture type setup, isn't it?
Yeah, joint venture, but you get a guaranteed amount, and then if we get upside over this amount, then you'll get a share of XYZ. But so we know going in there that we have we won't be in a similar position where, and I know France, there's a lot of hungry mouths and hands out in the local, municipalities, there's a lot of moving parts there. So
I was just thirsty when I was there. They never had any beer poured. There was like 3 guys in Marseille.
They're not big beer drinkers in France. I mean,
exactly.
It probably caught them off guard with the Irish and the Poms and ourselves landing there. That they always get surprised by how much beer we drink.
The on-field planning for the Lions series starts this weekend. As a former Wallaby, do you get excited still about the first test of the year?
Oh yeah. I get excited for every test, but the first one under a new coach that we've been involved in selecting and recruiting. It's exciting, and I'm excited because Joe had the pick of whoever he wanted to select, and he said, I want to stay local and I want to reward the guys who are here, which is, I think, is great, because it's he might change. He's got the option to change down the road if he wants to bring players in, but he wants to start on the footing that I want to recognise Super Rugby form. We performed a lot better in Super Rugby. I think we had 10 out of 26, maybe. It was about 38% win ratio. It's about double. I think it's double the wins that we've had this year versus last year. So it's trending. If we keep doing that and get the Waratahs in shape next year, then I think it's trending okay. So yeah, I'm excited by that. I think he's got some good opportunity there, and as I said, it is a longer term. I'm not, if the results don't go your way, it's disappointing, but we're taking a longer term view of it. We got to be able to knock over the Lions next year.
Yeah. What sort of discussions have you had with Joe? What sort of impression do you get that what sort of Wallabies coach does he want to be?
Look, the thing that attracted me and us to Joe was, I think the Wallabies for a long period of time, we've got the dynamic ball runners. I don't get too worried about that. We've set piece can come and go, but generally we can hold our own set piece. We've got the dynamic ball runners, but what I think we've been guilty of over a long period of time is being a bit sloppy. Little things like we just at the crucial moment the line out goes astray, or the ball presentation is poor, and we knock on a ball, trying to get an offload. It's just slop. I think we've got to this, and it's almost a rugby league mentality. We've got to throw the speculator, and everything I've seen from Joe abroad was his teams always look really disciplined. And
yes,
I think if he can get that discipline, and I don't mean red cards, yellow cards, I mean the discipline around ball placement and numbers at breakdown and hitting your line out and those things that has been lacking a little bit for many years. If he can get that, then I think we've got the dynamism to be able to bend lines of people, and then we've always had reasonably skillful backs. So he becomes, that I remember talking to people in the lead up to it, and one of the criticisms someone said that they thought it was a criticism, I thought it was a benefit. They said, if you're 30 centimetres off in your running line, Joe would stop and he'd come over and move you 30 centimetres. And I said, well, I actually like that.
That's attention to detail, isn't it?
That's the attention to detail we've been missing.
Yeah.
And
there's also the story about him where he has specific players who are allowed to throw offloads, and if you're not on that list, you really don't get to throw an offload.
That's not foreign to me. In my when I was running around Toto Kefu, it was pretty much free reign, but a lot of others. No.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you're Owen Finnegan in a World Cup semi or something like that. Michael Hooper announced his news Sunday night. You'd be full of admiration for someone who's given so much of their life to the game for the last 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, I remember seeing when I was working at Queensland Rugby, we had Liam Gill, and
yes,
I think Melbourne had Sean McMahon, and the Waratahs had Michael Hooper. And I remember thinking one of them's going to make it, the other two aren't. And I thought all three of them were really special players, and it was a shame that we didn't have the versatility that we could move. But I thought one of them's going to make it, but it's going to come down. Liam Gill was a great sevens player, great link player. McMahon was explosive and strong, and Hooper just had a big engine. He could just keep going. And I remember, for me, it's a great analogy of, well, the guy who's so mentally strong, he's the one who gets there. And Michael, I think, he's personified that grit that we all, Aussies like to see in their team. There's always that talisman that is just the grafter and the driver and sort of the leader. Even if he hasn't got the C beside his name, he'd always be up front. And he reminds me a bit of Phil Waugh as well, in terms of he wasn't the biggest guy, but he'd put his head in dark places where he wasn't sure that it'd come back off, not knocked off his shoulders. So huge admiration for Michael and what he's done, and not a huge man by any stretch, but just always played 10, 15 kilos above himself.
He seems so fearless. I mean, my big memory of Michael Hooper was at Newlands, and I was pitch side. And, Brett, you're always pitch side, so you know the relative heights and weights of players.
Yeah.
I could not get over. I'd never seen Hooper off of TV, and I could not get over him squaring up to Ibn Etzebeth and who's the other guy? I think Dwayne Vermeulen was there that day, and he was, squaring off with them. And I was like, what are you doing, man? Run away.
He's still, he's still even seeing him now sideline, and he's involved in Stan and all that. I'm still looking around thinking, I know a lot of you guys are ex-footballers, and you don't look like you're one of them. So he's still the smaller side, but he's given so much. And we certainly wish him well going forward. Yeah, absolutely. Daniel, this has been a fantastic chat. We really, really appreciate you being open and keen even to come on and have a chat with us. There's so many other areas that we could have easily got to, but we've all got other things to do. We can't keep going all day. So thanks so much for having a chat with us. We appreciate your time greatly.
No, my absolute pleasure. You guys are doing a great job, and I think there's a lot of podcasts out there that are doing a great job in promoting rugby, and you're one of them. So appreciate any time.
Oh, thanks. It was very substantive, and I think Australian fans will like that. They want to dig in. Yeah.
No, I said to Brett, I think the podcasts out there doing a lot of the heavy lifting of promotion of the game, and I listened to a bunch of them, including yours, and it's great that there's so much enthusiasm out there for it.
Very cool.
This is the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones, and wasn't that fantastic, mate, to hear from Rugby Australia chair Daniel Herbert directly? That was substantive, was the word you used before. That certainly was that.
Yeah, I always worry about when you have someone like that on, because you don't want to betray your listeners either. Like, they want you to go hard and ask questions. Yeah. But I think he went ahead and was hard on himself. I thought he dug in enough where I didn't feel like we let him slide or off the hook. I mean, he was straight up. He took on every issue. I mean, there were a couple of things I didn't ask about the Rebels, but that's an ongoing court case.
No,
and I kind of think it's weird.
And there were a few questions that we were going to ask, but he sort of veered into that territory and kind of preemptively answered it anyway. So I thought
it was great. I thought he was good fun, but also think he dove in. He wasn't patronizing and tried to make a joke of everything. I think he took it seriously, and I think he should. Yep. I think Australian fans deserve a serious leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with it. Completely agree with that. We will head around the grounds, albeit briefly, and we can do it briefly because there's not as much rugby to go around the grounds anymore. The top 14 final was played over the weekend. Was it Friday night in Marseille? Did I get that right? Or was it
it was Friday. It was a Friday night match.
It was a Friday night game. Yeah. Toulouse 59-3. I couldn't believe that.
Bordeaux bottled it. It was horrible.
Were Bordeaux locked up about 20 minutes in and just not allowed to play for the rest of the game? What happened? Tell me.
They really looked out on their feet. And I know, they're big squads and they have lots of money, so they can have a lot of depth, but they still, Bordeaux, I think 14 of the 15 players that started have over 1,000 minutes.
That's
so for the big heavies, that's a lot. And they just looked like they had nothing left. And, Toulouse can just throw. They have two teams. They could just literally keep throwing bodies at you. They're all great.
Anton Dupont, as far as I can tell, has played 4 games for Toulouse this year.
He has one of the lower minutes. You're right, and they just keep coming at you, and there's no respite. There's no relief. And rugby's always been one of those games where there can be a lopsided score, and it's not quite as bad as you think. It just has a steamroller effect.
No,
and Bordeaux was done. You could just tell they were looking around. Luku, I think, was looking around. He just wanted the clock to go quicker.
Yeah, right. That was one of those games. I've not seen any of it yet, and I looked at the score and I thought, wow, I cannot believe that's
it flatters Bordeaux. I mean,
it flatters Bordeaux. Wow.
They were lucky to have 3.
They're lucky to get the 3. Okay. All right, lessons learned for next year. It was the final round of Major League Rugby was played on the weekend. New England locked down top spot in the Eastern Conference with a 40-7 win over RFC LA. Chicago secured 3rd spot in East with their win over Miami. Old Glory beat Nola Gold as well. The goddamn Houston Sabercats edged Dallas 29-28 in the Texas Derby, an 83rd minute penalty goal.
Cannot hear you, static. This is becoming annoying.
Houston led 26-7 at halftime, so it's a hell of a comeback from Dallas to actually lead that by 80 minutes. So God damn Houston Sabercats. San Diego upset Seattle 45-33.
That was cool. That was a big match. Yeah.
That was a big surprise. That was the 3rd B2 clash in the Western Conference. So the conference semifinals are now July 20 and 21. So we'll come back to Major League Rugby in the next few weeks. There was more international rugby played on the weekend, and got to say, Japan's start of the Eddie Jones second coming isn't going great. The Japanese 11 was beaten 36-10 by the Māori All Blacks at the Chichibu in Tokyo, and the story over there is about backing youth, and he's got a university fullback who's going to be a superstar and all this sort of stuff. But gee, I feel like I've seen this movie before already.
The Samasho Garabu program is not off to a good start.
Not going well at all, is it?
He might. This might really be one of those things where it just doesn't. It does not get better quick enough. I mean,
what did you say to me about that quote about how did you go broke? And you said quickly and then slowly,
gradually, and then all of a sudden,
gradually and quickly. Yeah, exactly. It feels like that, doesn't it? It really feels like that. Anyway, we will be back with later in this week with games of the week, our first international version, and we will get in and particularly into the test matches coming this weekend. We didn't talk about the Wallabies Wales test as much as we might have liked to, but that's because we were too substantive on other factors. But we will be back to do that with games of the week, and there are some fantastic tests coming this weekend. So that's just another reason for you to like, follow, subscribe, and make sure you don't miss it when it does drop later this week. The biggest headlines of the last 7 days or so, mate, to finish up, and Daniel Herbert actually touched on it. Simon Rawalui was last week named Director of Performance by the New South Wales Waratahs for the next 3 seasons. So a really good appointment, and I liked his description of the Waratahs being success in waiting. and it sounds a bit pithy, but I know exactly what he means. You could have said the same thing about the Blues for the last 20 years. And, look how that's turned out. So Dan McKellar and Scott Wiseman will remain front runners for the head coach role. There's some suggestion that perhaps Friday this week we might know more about that. And there's even some reports that even say that Scott Wiseman might be the preferred candidate currently. So that will be interesting to see how that goes. On Dan McKellar, Dan Palmer resigned as Leicester's scrum coach late last week as well. And basically, evidently, it was a case of he wasn't sure about the decisions made and the things going forward. So he resigned before Michael Cheika was confirmed as the new Leicester Tigers head coach, which certainly suggests to me that the Tigers got the ball rolling on the idea of moving on their coach some time ago.
I think so. The Tigers had good set pieces. So, they didn't have an attack coach. They didn't have an attack coach all season. No. And they deferred too much to the players.
And they had a lot of injuries, and they didn't have an S&C head either. So yeah. And we did discuss Michael Hooper, who announced Sunday night that his Olympic dream, my Olympic journey has come to an end, he said in his social post, and with it, my Australian rugby career. And so I think he's actually still down to head to Paris as a sevens commentator for Stan Sport, and he'll be great at that. There's a media career waiting for him, I've got no doubt. But him saying my Australian rugby career is over is fairly telling. I think that's got 2 or 3 year Japanese sojourn to finish written all over it, I think.
Or San Diego. What's your
favorite,
and
the States has been mentioned for sure.
What's your favorite memory of Michael Hooper?
Yeah, you asked me this over the weekend to come up with something, and I found it really, really hard to do because it's impossible to in such a long career. And he played 120 odd tests, 170 plus Super Rugby games, played 2 full years down with the Brumbies before he went back to the Waratahs. So, debuted in Canberra in 2010, I think it was.
I forgot he was a Brumby.
He started out as a Brumby.
I thought he was a Waratah, yeah.
He debuted as a 18-year-old and a slightly chubby 18-year-old at that, if you look back at the early photos.
But with great hair, always had great hair.
Yeah, always had. It's so hard to come up with a single highlight because his highlights are all similar. And there was the Wallabies through their socials put out this great image of Hooper in each one of his 10 years as a Wallaby. And the thing that struck me in that, aside from the fact that they'd airbrushed all non-current sponsors out of it, is that he had the same facial expression the whole way through. And so he just played the same way from age 18 to age 32, a 14-year career, and he just gave it everything the whole way through. So I couldn't come up with anything at all, which doesn't really answer your question.
I always thought he looked a bit mad, you know.
He did a little bit.
He just looked like he was insane in a
Yeah.
good way, in a good rugby
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Absolutely, in a good way, and we certainly wish him the best. I'd still love to have a chat to him, and he's absolutely still on our list. That maybe he's easy to get to now. We'll keep we'll keep on to him. We'll keep on to him. Final thoughts for the week. It's been a big chat this week. It's been a big chat.
I've just all the way gone into test footy already. My brain is in Pretoria. I'm doing tongue exercises to make sure I don't sprain it this time, and we're gonna be good. Sorry. We kept it really good until then.
Oh, it's just no. There's just so many things that I know that I can't say. But that is episode 21 of the 8-9 combo. Check out the show notes in the links for the links to the 8-9 combo on Twitter and on YouTube, where you can find full video version of the podcast every week as well. Harry and I remain on the socials in our usual places at Harry Baldy Jones and at BMC Sport. And you'll find links for our socials and also where you will find our written work on the Raw for Harry and on Rugby Pass for me. This is the 8-9 combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed, coming from the podcast double act you already had. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones. And we'll be back in your ears in a few days' time with the international version of Games of the Week.
Come Schmidt with us. Hey, Schmidt's on the... This is